We're here with Eddie Goldman. This has been Juan Manuel Lopez-Rogers Mtagwa. A great fight, up for probably a fight of the year. Eddie, tell us a little bit about your...
Definitely, it shows both the good and the bad about the sport and business of boxing. First of all, the fight itself, if you didn't get a chance to see it, hopefully it'll be up on YouTube or somewhere. Juan Manuel Lopez in a 12-round war, definite fight of the year candidate against Rogers Mtagwa, a brawler. It was really more Mtagwa's fight, where it just became an all-out war and brawl.
An all-out war,
and
yes.
And it intensified. You'd think that these guys might slow down a little bit. It intensified till the 12th round, which has to be one of the round of the year candidates. Mtagwa pursuing Juan Manuel Lopez, the favorite, landing huge bombs, not able to drop him. It was a very close fight. I didn't score it round by round. It could have gone either way. The journalists at ringside, some had one, some had another. It was a pretty one-sided, and this is where it starts to get weird in boxing, a pretty one-sided verdict for Juan Manuel Lopez. And even though he brought most of the fans at the beginning, you remember, tons of cheers for Juan Manuel Lopez, who's from Puerto Rico, a lot of Puerto Rican fans, and just hardcore boxing fans who love him. And Mtagwa is not considered really a top title contender, though he's a very, very good and very tough fighter. He's based in Philly, originally from Tanzania in Africa. Well, at the end of the fight, when they announced the decision, there were a lot of boos.
There were a lot of boos. It could have almost been a draw.
It could, yeah, except there was the 1 point. There was the knockdown. Depends how you scored the last round. Some people gave it 10-8 for Mtagwa. Really depends how it ended up. Then they messed up the announcing. They announced one judge is having it 116, which is bizarre, which would mean there were several even rounds. That turned out to be a mistake. It was 111, so it was a unanimous decision for Juan Manuel Lopez, and they messed up. They just took a lot of the warmth, the respect that people had for these two great warriors in the ring was squandered because of a lot of the pettiness that goes on. Again, it was on an independently produced pay-per-view that few people could get to see. The way the media was treated was very bad. They wanted to be very chintzy with who got to sit ringside, even though there were numerous empty seats at ringside. We had to do the interviews in between rounds where they had the music playing. I understand that Bob Arum wants to have the music playing between rounds, not to bore the fans, but you're trying to do interviews and there's loud music. It's just very difficult to do. And then a lot of these interviews we had to do with the lights out. So one of the writers said to me, you couldn't see and you couldn't hear. It was a nightmare trying to cover this event. Even though you had this tremendous brawl, very few people gave Rogers Mtagwa a chance, but he fought like a Philly fighter. He just gave it his all, and he seemed to get stronger as the fight went on.
He did seem to get stronger. I mean, you thought that he would go down, and you saw him get hit, and then he would come back, and the next thing you know, it could have really been scored either way. He was relentless. He was really.
He was relentless, and he was landing bomb after bomb, and he was landing a lot of wild shots, a lot of which found their mark. And after the fight, we spoke with tons of other media people. With Juanma, and he said he had trouble figuring out the angles because Mtagwa just comes at you from all angles, very unorthodox angles. And in terms of his boxing skills, he's going to have to go and work on that, cutting off the ring and the movement, because Mtagwa was coming forward, particularly in the latter half of the fight, against Juanma, who was retreating. And I asked him, I said, before the fight, you said that this was going to go 12 rounds, that this fight was going to be difficult. Did you think it would be something as much of a war? And he said, well, I had a lot of respect for this guy, but not like this. So it was definitely.
They both took a lot of punches.
They both
I mean,
took a lot of
that was
punches.
one thing. They
Yes.
both took a lot.
Yes, Rogers Mtagwa, I think this definitely will deserve a Fight of the Year nomination. I don't know that it'll win. We still have a while to go in the year. Last year, he was nominated for his fight with Tomas Villa, which he was behind. He almost lost, and he pulled it out, and he won with a knockout. I think that was in the 10th round. This one, he lost a controversial decision. But guys like Rogers Mtagwa are what keep people being boxing fans, because here's a guy now has 13 losses on his record. He's not going to go to the Hall of Fame. He's sort of like a Mickey Ward, blood and guts fighter with his own style, much smaller guy than Gaddy and Ward, and he just keeps on coming, fighting, and he has the heart of a warrior. And that's why even the writers, we're not supposed to cheer in the press section, even many of the writers stood up and applauded when this fight was over, because it was such a valiant effort by these two fighters. So it was a lot of fun.
And before we leave, Yurokis Gamboa, he did a nice job. I don't think it was quite anything like this fight. I mean,
Right.
he didn't have his hands full
Right.
like this. But do you think that there's going to be like a fight now between Juan Manuel and Yurokis Gamboa, or
That's
do
the
you feel that
plan.
that's what the plan?
That's the
has
plan.
always been?
Juan Ma said he'd like to go up to 126. Gamboa's a featherweight. Gamboa did what he had to do because he was expected to knock out the veteran Weber Garcia, and he did.
And he did.
These fights were basically set up as showcase fights, but the one with Juan Ma turned out to be much more difficult for him. But that's the plan. The people in New York have seen them, and now there are questions about Juan Ma. He had trouble handling these wild, brawling shots from Mtagwa, who is a smaller fighter. What will he do against a bigger Gamboa, who's a featherweight? He's really came in about 5 pounds heavier than him today, or about 4 pounds heavier than him. What's he going to be able to do? But Mtagwa is a guy Gamboa has been a guy who's been dropped in previous fights. He keeps his hands low and he makes some defensive mistakes. And so that Garcia was unable to capitalize on that today. But will Juan Manuel Lopez, a southpaw, be able to capitalize on that? These are raising some interesting questions. But Mtagwa wants to have a rematch. We know that. I don't know that they're going to give it to him.
But it was a wonderful night at Madison Square Garden and a great night of boxing. Thank you, Eddie Goldman.
Thank you, Kristal Hart.
Here in New York City.